Hello to everyone. Welcome to the Light Song podcast. My name is Sarah Marie, and I have with us today Lori Shainski, who has been with Light Song from the beginning times. She's been a council member since there was a council. She has been an integral component to how Light Song has been shaped. She is currently a teacher. She also assists in many classes and has her own independent offerings that are always available to Lightsong students and so much more. I'm merely scratching the surface to who Lori Shainski is. And I'm so excited to have her here because we get to learn about how Lori Shainski became Lori Shainski. She's going to share with us how she started as a sound healer, and we'll bring in more information as it feels appropriate to do so. But first and foremost, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sarah Marie. It's a just absolute delight and an honor to be chosen to be part of this podcast.
Humility. I forgot to add that piece. Always so humble. And which is so funny to me because I think I've shared with you before that you're kind of Light Song celebrity to me. When I first started, when I first started with Light Song, I was like, who is this woman? Where is she getting her power? My gosh. And I've mentioned that you're a sound healer, and I think we all know that that's how you show up in the world, so one of the many ways. And we at Light Sound incorporate a lot of sound medicine into the curriculum, into our healing. And you carried with you so much. I could feel the history of who you were whenever you would show up for class or for ceremony. And I'm hoping that we can get into a little bit of of that history. Like, you carry yourself in such a way that you just know that you know some things. I know that you've been to some places. I want to know more. So how did you start? How did you begin as a sound healer?
I feel like the deepest spiritual roots of my relationship with sound started when I started teaching people about bird song. And I started and ran a nonprofit teaching kids and adults about ecology in the outdoors. And we had a great opportunity to become a part of this national biodiversity study called nature mapping.
Mm.
And so in Oregon, it basically involved scientists and kids and people who wanted to be involved in it, got them involved in making observations about presence of animal species. And in Oregon, 95% of the observations that someone would make would be birds. And 90% of those observations, if they knew how to make them, were audio. Because the vegetation is so complex, you hear birds before you see them, and sometimes you never see them. So I got trained by Barb Cott, who was one of the first Light Song people with me in the original advanced class with Jan in 1998, and she taught me how to bird by ear. And then I started teaching kids and adults how to bird by ear as well. And I had to become comfortable with singing the bird songs in conversation when we would come back with our observations. Oh, I heard this. Did it sound like this? And I had to sing,
Oh.
which was kind of an unusual start. So that was where I think my adult capacity to start making sound that wasn't song in front of people, because it's a challenge for many of us to feel comfortable to sing in front of people
For
and
sure.
and to speak in front of people.
Hmm.
And so I feel like the birds kind of pop that bubble of you know, resistance or self-critique or judgment that kept, my voice a little quiet.
When did you start to understand sound as healing?
So I was me and a bunch of people were at one of the very early practicums, which I think was even called Spirit Quest back there with Jan.
Mhm.
And back then we would do two practica one week, and then we'd have a week off, and then we'd have another one. And the week that I was down in camp, we were singing up to the Questers, and there's some very traditional prized Lakota songs that Jan received from the Ghost Horse family, to be part of our the medicine of our community and our ceremonies. And so I was singing, and I was standing next to Robin Bonelli, Colleen Bonelli's husband, who was he was also a big part of the community back then. And we reached over and we held hands. And in that moment, I heard the spirit say that I was supposed to become Robin's singer, because he was one of the sweat lodge facilitators, water pourers.
Yes.
So it was like, okay. I didn't even know, I had no idea what I was getting myself into in hearing that call and then committing to it.
Mhm.
So it was really in the lodge, the sweat lodges that we would have on a pretty regular basis. Um, we'd have like Jan would pour lodge Friday night, and then we'd have class Saturday and Sunday. And then she dreamed a couple of people to become water pourers so that she could share that responsibility. So Robin was one of the people who she dreamed, and so um, I had to learn all the songs for lodge. And in the learning and in the singing in the lodge, the spirits were once I got through the bubble on that one, because that's kind of a big deal.
Yes.
The spirits started teaching me about the power of intentional vibration and information that was encoded in these songs, but also at a greater level, sound. Like, well,
Mhm.
so we were singing these songs that had a big history and a big, um, a big quanta of power
Mhm.
and wisdom. And when that's running through you, there's a lot of other information and things that get revealed, that it was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And they
Yes.
were like, they were cleaning me out with those songs, and they were teaching me about how the songs were working. And in the lodge, it's dark. And so um, they were showing me in a feeling way, they were showing me with a rich array of images. And it was just sort of a magical inoculation process
Mhm.
from being in lodge.
Yeah. So it sounds like sound as medicine started in a fairly traditional way. And now I understand you to have, I mean, you incorporate so much. You have the singing bowls, you have channeled intergalactic sounds. There's so much that you do now that is incorporated into your work. When did those pieces start to come in?
So I was on my way to a practicum, and my wife Judith gave me a CD that she had gotten from somebody, and she said, "Oh, you got to hear this guy, Tom Kenyon." And so on my way to practicum, not a very good idea to be driving and listening to I didn't know what I was listening to when I stuck the CD into the player. And it was just magical. And nobody in the community had heard of Tom Kenyon before. And so I wasn't getting infused from anybody, about him. He just like showed up in my car on my way to ceremony, and it was like, oh my goodness.
Tell us who Tom Kenyon is for those of us who don't know. I feel like he's pretty well known in spiritual communities, but I'm sure there are some who don't understand who that man is.
He is a magical channel of sound that, the thing I loved about him is he started out as a scientist like I did. And he was on his way to class or something at a university, and he had this out of body, internal body, physiological and metaphysiological experience that it was kind of like it was like the intergalactic beings came down and made contact with him and started teaching him about sound and the greater levels of wisdom beyond what we have cultivated here on earth. And so he after he recovered I mean it changed his DNA and his physiology from what I could understand from his stories and so forth. And he started doing research on the effects of sound on brain chemistry. It's called acoustic brain research, is what he called it. And he discovered in the science realm just what sound was doing sort of to the brain and how it could change brain waves and so forth. And then later on, I think also illuminated and collaborated with other physiological effects of sound. And while it was kind of like he was tootling along. This is my understanding, of what happened is he started to have more and more visitations and experiences with other beings that were channeling sound through him. And it was like beyond the science physical realms and way into the metaphysical realms. And so I decided, I don't know when it was, pretty early on, like 2003 or something, I decided to go to one of his sound intensives, which he used to have in Seattle. And we're in this big auditorium. There's like 500 of us and everything. And it was really amazing. Like I got the sort of the sciencey, like how sound was working, and then I got the healer's perspective. But then he also sort of inoculated us with the metaphysical intergalactic medicine that he worked with. And he didn't talk about what was going on behind the scenes of what he was doing, except for in the sort of theoretical, this is how you would approach, making sound intentionally. And some of the things to be cognizant of when you're working with a person. And it was pretty titrated down, very very understandable and usable. It was like, wow, that's going to take my traditional ceremonial singing to a whole different level. And it also explained some of the imagery that the spirits were showing me in lodge about what sound was doing inside with the people that we were singing together with.
Mhm.
And then, and what I noticed was, like, in the evenings, we would have these sound healing, uh, oh, I don't know what ceremonies, kind of ceremonies where we would be the recipients and he and his spirits would do that for us and to us. And but he never really explained the what was happening in the background. But because I had shamanic training, it was like, oh, he's working with these spirits. He's not talking about that in his sound healing sort of methodology,
Mhm.
but I could feel that there were these other layers going on that he wasn't necessarily talking about in the intensive.
Mhm.
And so it kind of set me on this trajectory of investigating and working with, well, how can shamanism inform sound healing in more of a direct, transparent way,
Mhm.
um, and also how can sound healing inform shamanism? Because it
Right.
was like I was dabbling in the sound informing shamanism as a lodge singer, and I also sang for 15 years at the Sundance, and that was kind of the opposite of anything scientific, where we're just channeling the power of these songs, and
Mhm.
things are happening out there and they're happening in here and they're happening around the drum and to the people.
Mhm.
And so I'm having these experiences and making these observations. And as a recovering scientist, it's like I started to really put some things together, at least at the human level, of what might be at play and what might be good sort of principles that tie the sound healing and the shamanism together, because nobody was really doing that.
Mhm.
And um, and then I had the good fortune of going to study with Jonathan Goldman, who rose up in sound healing in at a similar time as Tom Kenyon, and they had like simultaneous observations of the same phenomena, where they discovered that the most important thing was that sound was a carrier of intention,
Mm.
and that it wasn't enough to make sound, but holding that intention and then working with that intention with sound is
Mhm.
what really was like, oh, that was a almost a law. There aren't very many laws in the sort of spiritual world, but sound plus intention equals manifestation, basically.
Mhm.
And Jonathan was the same way, where you could tell he talked a little bit more about, and Tom did too, about the beings that he was channeling, but he didn't talk about how that happened. You knew that it was happening. He mentioned the Hathors. Tom mentions the Hathors, and Jonathan mentions his his team, his spirit team. But they
Mhm.
don't talk about how do we do that?
Mhm.
And so it's like, oh, this is a really key area of inquiry that I feel like I could really contribute to our community and to the broader spiritual community in starting to really learn how to do that channeling of sound in a spiritual container with intention and make that accessible to everyone.
Yes. When did you that's what I appreciate so much about what you offer, is that your classes make it accessible. You show us how to do that thing that we are in awe of when we see other people do it. And your classes really presents the fact that we all have the capacity to do this thing. And it's just a matter of applying yourself or thinking or feeling or putting your attention in a certain way. When did you start doing your classes? How long have you been teaching?
Um, let's see. I think somewhere around 2005.
Yeah. Okay. So a good amount of time.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I sort of have this pin in my timeline of moving to Hidden Lake, which was 2005. And I'm
Mhm,
trying to remember if I taught sound healing before that at the church, which is where all the light song classes were,
mhm.
or whether I was teaching mostly at Hidden Lake in my living room, and then the studio.
Yeah. I love that there's been an evolution of your space to
Yeah,
fit, to match what's coming through.
yeah. So, and the cool thing about classes that I started having, yeah, we do Wednesday classes at the church, and then I do my weekend classes at the lake, and people would come and stay there, and it'd be sort of a retreat kind of environment. And what I noticed with both sort of delivery systems for those courses were people were gathering data and doing spiritual research. We were all doing that together.
Mhm,
And yeah, I had a head start, a good head start on people, on people's progress, but we were all learning about spirit and how to get out of the way
mhm.
and what kinds of things preclude our using our voice, because it really comes down to, and that was something that became pretty clear early on, is it really comes down to our relationship with our voice.
Mm.
I mean, you can, I'm gonna bust myself and my I have a bit of a feeling about tuning forks. It's like, oh,
Mm.
there's these great tuning forks, and people think they, yes, there's a deep level of teaching, and there is an assumption in some circles that if one learns how to use a tuning fork, they're a sound healer.
Mm.
And the tuning fork, there's no voice involved.
Mhm,
There's
mhm.
intention and there's, stuff. But the human voice as a participant in
Mm.
my world is what makes sound healing sound healing,
You
along with creating a sacred space and
Mhm.
filling that container with intention and the capacity for people to surrender to um, that magic, knowing that they're held.
Yeah, I've always thought of your work as teaching us how to be the tuning fork.
Yes.
We're the human tuning fork, and you teach us how to connect in with a channel of information through intention and by carefully curating the space that we're working within so that we can really lock into what we're wanting to bring through. And then we are the hollow bone, we're the channel, we're the tuning fork through which that information comes through. Um, I know that for a really long time we were in person learning from you, and now there has been the shift to online. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how the work has shifted now that so much of it is happening in the virtual world.
Yeah, I do want to back up a little bit in
Sure.
my history.
Yeah.
Um, so to what's now called level 3 in
Mm,
Lightsong, which is the overall invitation of level 3 is to develop a relationship, a partnership with a specific spirit, and to learn how to uh, merge, join up, and merge with the spirit to allow this spirit to deliver a message to the people.
mhm,
And that is fundamental. That is the fundamental um, covenant of shamans.
mm,
That is what shamans do. That's what their spiritual assignment, their dharmic assignment is to as best as they can get out of the way and deliver spiritual wisdom and power from
mhm,
the divine into the dimensions that we are in right now, and actually it goes beyond that. But so um, my experiences merging with and learning what kinds of things do I need to do to get out of the way to let the spirit that I was working with tell their story.
mhm,
And the so Jan, I don't know how many people know this, but Jan studied with Michael Harner, and I studied with Michael Harner too. I was kind of simultaneously studying with Michael and Jan, and it's really Michael's uh, ceremony to do the merging and to do the regalia process.
mhm,
And Jan and Lightsong developed the same kind of aim, if you will, because it's very fundamental. I mean, that is what the shamans the world over, there's some kind of costume frequently
mhm,
and ceremony where the shaman goes into a state and then channels power and wisdom for the healing of the people.
mhm,
And so, really, I and Michael um, traveled the world over as an anthropologist first, and then got invited into these shamanic cultures where he got to see and be and live with these people, and really, I feel like he was initiated and dharmically directed to bring that medicine to Western cultures and North America. So I always like to honor Michael, and Jan um, saw the value in that process, and so I really honor that. And Michael's original instructions to us was not to tell a story, but
mhm.
to sing a story.
Huh.
And so I don't know where, and so that was that level 3, and Jan sort of took it to a different place because I did my regalias, 2 regalias or 3 regalias with Michael, and that was all singing. And I think I did 3 or 4 with Jan, and those were not necessarily singing.
Sure, but it was still the same idea of being the
Yes,
hollow bone, being the
exactly.
channel through which the information is moving through. Um, I so appreciate you honoring your teachers. Thank you for that. And I'm seeing the connection in why the level 3 material that we have here at Lightsong is so integral to being a carrier of sound healing as well, because it's the same thing. It's
Yeah,
being the channel for a consciousness, and
yeah,
it's 100% in my mind making sense that knowing how to be that kind of a vessel
absolutely.
is imperative to being that same kind of vessel when you're channeling sound,
Yeah.
when you're channeling music.
The cool thing about how Jan and Lightsong has been doing level 3 and the merging in the regalia is the importance of um, community
Mhm.
and community support and the mentoring with the assistants and the just having opportunities to practice and share with each other because that in Michael's class we'd all fly into Marin County in California twice a year,
Okay.
and so I was fortunate that my friend Deb Scrivens and I were doing this together, so I had somebody to talk to, but
Mhm.
I didn't have that kind of community support that I did when in doing it was the graduate class is what it was called when we were doing it with Jan, which has evolved into level 3, and that community piece is so important,
Mhm.
and that
It
there it created this a level of safety, I guess, and camaraderie that I didn't get necessarily, you know, twice a year with Michael.
That makes a lot of sense. And I actually was speaking with Midge Houlihan Mead about how the beauty of our level 2 class is that it's 18 months long, and every month you're getting healing and you're getting community members, fellow students to practice
Yeah,
that healing modality with for a month, and then you learn something new and you practice that for a month, and you have access to people who are at the same place you are in your learning and who are just as eager and willing to be the person you practice on, and vice versa. And that is something I think that is very special and unique to our community. Yes.
you want to come in? A
Do we
little
have a guest?
a kitty, yeah.
Aw.
She was doing her own kind of sound healing.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Kitty.
I know.
um yeah, I'm glad that you're presencing that again, because that comes up so often when I'm doing these podcasts with people, is the community aspect of what Lightsong has to offer is not found often elsewhere. And there's an eagerness, I feel like, to the community here to be in connection, and there's this innate understanding that bringing the what we learn at Lightsong into the rhythm of our life is being very key to how it can transform us and how we can use
Yeah,
it as a
yeah,
tool. Hmm. Yes, I agree. Does now feel like a good time to talk
yes,
about how
yes,
it's
right,
shifted to more of an online
yeah.
space? Okay.
So, in March of 2020, as lockdown was starting, and I had um, my first semester 10-month class, or maybe was doing a 5-month class. I can't remember. I think it was a 5-month class, and we convened, I think, twice, January and February, and then it was like, okay, we can't do this anymore. And right before the third meeting that we were going to do was the equinox, and I usually poured lodge in the physical sweat lodge. And it was like the spirits really wanted me to pour lodge using Zoom. And it was like, oh my God, I had never run any kind of meeting on Zoom. I had to figure out, how to push the different buttons and so forth. But what really struck me was um, how the spirits were guiding us to continue the work, even, you know, online. And I poured the lodge, and I don't know, there were a lot of people. I mean, enough people that we could have a brief conversation at the end to find out, well, what was that like? Because no, I'm pretty sure I was the first person on the planet to pour a virtual lodge, and it was like we all agreed that, yeah, it was different, but the essence, it was like the signature essence of that ceremony still came through. And it was like, oh, it was a teaching in this is possible, and teaching sound classes is possible. And so I continued with my group, the 5-month group, for 3 or 4 more sessions. Um, and what we discovered was that the privacy that we had in our own spaces created this safety that was a little elusive in a group when it came to making sound with our voices. Because when we're in the physical presence and there's invitation to channel a song or make sound or do something with your voice, the witness and the concern of outer judgment is is turned up pretty high. And
Right.
so we could practice with our audios off and experiment in our space with our voices in a way that we couldn't do before. Or when we went into a breakout room in pairs, there was a intimacy. Strangely, it was kind of one of those paradoxical things where there was a level of intimacy and safety that people um, recognized and enjoyed and utilized.
I love that. And I want to add a little bit of my own experience to what you're saying. I feel like there is that um the safety of being, you're so connected to the community, but you are in your own space. And so there's an intimacy actually I have felt that is created with your own self
Yeah, exactly.
that is missing sometimes when you're in this larger group. You're very much having a collective experience. But there's a certain level of personal connection, I feel like, that happens when you're in the online space. And also, it feels like, and I've heard other people say this too, when you're in that intense place of focus, because you have to shift how you pay attention, because you don't have the group standing next to you. We're in the ethers together, right? And so there's another level of potency that I have experienced, because my focus and my attention on what we're doing has to be even more intense.
Absolutely.
And so it has cultivated for me a different level of intensity, for lack of a better word.
I think so too.
Yeah. Yeah. You have
The
to
other thing,
focus on your own channel, and
yeah,
then the channel of the receiving channel is also different.
yeah.
Yeah. So I know that you have a class that's coming up, and I want to make sure that we have some time to talk a little bit about what that offering is. Is there anything else that feels important to share before we go into that space?
Well, one of the things that I don't know how this is related to sound healing per se. It's kind of, I think it's related to how we're all evolving,
Mm,
or at least how I'm evolving, is I feel like, um, and some of this came through with my meditation with Metatron during the Light Song Mystery School adventures, is I feel like with Zoom and Instagram and Facebook and social media, we are creating these digital realities
mm,
that are, but it's more than that. It's like, we talk about alternative realities and jumping timelines. And I feel like in our digital exchange, because there's a lot of spiritual healing being exchanged in digital form, that we're actually creating these other realities that are being sort of recorded, or it's kind of like what they do with a chip. It gets an imprint
mhm.
and then it functions, and when energy goes into it, it functions, and then energy comes out of it, some transformation happens.
Yeah.
And um, it's just kind of those, it's like I'm out in beauty and I want to take pictures of it and then I want to share it with people, and it was like, well, what am I doing that for? And I feel like that we are creating these layers of reality with each
Mhm.
other.
Hmm.
I don't know. It was just one of those like mind blown kind of things.
That when you're speaking about it, the impression I'm getting is like a landscape that's being we're all collectively creating. It's a landscape of information that we're all adding to. And it's definitely a realm that you can click into and be there for a while. And then you can click out of it and come back into this ordinary, air quotes, ordinary reality. Um, and so I don't know, maybe what you're picking up on is almost a teaching tool for helping the masses understand that there are alternate realities that can be accessed, depending on where you're looking.
I'm definitely have been tapping into those for informing and fueling the kinds of things that I'm doing right now in ordinary reality.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like tapping into the collective consciousness and pulling the information down for your own individual experience.
I also feel like we are also creating our own individual layers
Mm,
of those landscapes
mm,
that interact or don't interact with each other.
mhm. It's like a living tapestry
Yeah.
that weaves into someone else's thread, and then we unweave and weave into something else. I love that imagery. That's so tell us about the intensive that you have coming up.
It's at the end of October, Friday night through Sunday. And um, as with all of my classes, whoever shows up is the magnet for the work we end up doing. In
Mm,
fact, sometimes I feel like I want to pay my clients and my students because they have created the yearning
mm,
pool for which the spirits come in and partnership with us,
yeah.
go into partnership. So um, And sometimes, we all just work on personal issues in our own spaces, facilitated by the lessons that we're learning in the moment. And other times we work in pairs or triads and work on each other. It always comes down to, no matter what the class, demography and spirituality identities is made up of, we always work on the voice, and we always work on our relationship with spirit,
Okay.
and
So,
really tapping into um, our intentions. How are we, our stories, our narrative, how are we telling ourselves, what are we saying to ourselves about the world and our interaction with it?
mhm.
And where in those stories can we shift and change beliefs and ideas and perspectives to have more fruitful, joyful outcomes?
Okay. So your class is a way of connecting with your own voice to shape your life to look the way that you want it to look.
And to feel, and especially to feel the way you want it to feel.
Okay. What are the elements? What kind of elements do you bring into the teaching process?
Hmm. Well, shamanism and sound healing.
Hmm.
um, really setting intentions, working with physical objects,
Okay.
um, bringing nature in
Hmm.
as partners in the process. Frequently, I will incorporate some aspect of soul and family constellation work, which is a marvelous modality. I think it's shamanism. I think there's other people who know it's shamanism, where we open to um, this deeper knowledge and deeper knowingness in our own being, and in those who came before us, in the fabric of the family soul, and tapping into that ancestral support.
Nice.
And also, with that comes a change in our own narrative about the way that we think about our ancestors, because I would say every single person that I've been involved with, when I talk about the ancestors, they always have some kind of story about who they were that limits their access to the truth of their family soul. And
That's
so really accessing the truth of the magical nature of those ones who came before us, and listening and feeling their support, and helping change whatever story we might have about them to serve the bigger story of the bigger collective.
wow. That is so powerful, and I feel like it is so needed, particularly at this moment in time, so that we can begin to shift away from creating from the wounded past and
Right.
you know rather instead create from the healed present.
Mhm.
So
And the
that feels like,
generative and the generative pass.
yeah.
That's the piece that often gets missed, which is the most important part. It's
Say
the
more about that, the generative path.
um we have ones that came before us. They have given me this phrase. It's a little bit loaded, but the ones who got it right.
Hmm.
It's the ancestors who you can follow your lineage back past the break or wound,
Mhm.
to the ascended, lucky, wise ones. And
Okay.
that flow, that knowledge, that the serendipity, that creativity, that power is what got us here. It's like if that didn't exist, we
Mhm.
wouldn't exist.
So connecting to the ancestry in a way that acknowledges that there were good things happening too.
There had to be. You
There
can't.
had to be. Yes.
I mean, it's a biological, you know, uh, reality.
I really appreciate that because I think it is very easy to completely identify with all the things that have gone wrong. And
Exactly.
so remembering that there is always good things happening alongside of the bad things, and that we are made up of those as well. And it really is a matter of where you're putting your attention. That is where you live. Yeah, that's amazing. I don't think I knew that that was incorporated into the sound intensives. I'm so happy
It
to know
it is
that.
from time to time, and there's so many different ways that it comes into play, especially as we have opportunities to look at our relationship with our voice.
Mhm, mhm.
There's a couple of constellation exercises or ceremonies that I do that are pretty mind blowing. From and I learned them from my teachers, Susie Tucker and Francesca Boring Mason. Great
Okay.
people who I got to learn from.
So I'm going to look up really quick the dates of your class so that we can share them here.
October
We'll
28th.
also, you have it? Okay,
Oh yeah,
October 28th.
28th. Yeah, through the 30th. So Friday
Okay.
night from 6:30 to 9,
Mhm.
and during that time we really focus on creating the container and listening to the spirits about what our intentions might be, personal healing and learning intentions, and setting that in motion, like lighting the proverbial candle for that manifestation to happen. And then depending on who's there, I typically will go through elements. I have an equation, like all good scientists. And it actually started out with Tom Kenyon and Jonathan Goldman. Tom's was sound plus intention equals effect, or healing. I'll just say healing. And Jonathan Goldman would say vocalization plus visualization equals
Mhm.
manifestation.
Hmm.
And so in my work, I've added three other elements. So, yes, intention and sound, and spirit, and listening, and the open heart. And so we investigate how these are, where we are personally with those gifts around those particular ingredients, and how to blend and bring them together to manifest and create and heal and transform.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
sharing so much of you with us.
Thank you.
Sure, we'll have you back on to tell us more about all that you have experienced, but this has been wonderful, and I thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Until next time.
Okay. Mwah. I hit you too.
Mm.